Thank you, Tim, and hello, everyone. I'm excited here to share with you today a bit that I've learned as I've gone about farmer well-being. Hopefully, I have some slides here to share with you. And I'll start with my role. As you can see, I'm a professor in animal science at the University of Manitoba. And so my area of focus really is animal health and welfare. But about 6 years ago, I decided that my research was much too cow focused. And so I wanted to zoom out and really look at the bigger picture of life on the farm. And I now see my role as being a connector of all the people who work in these different fields. I bring together social scientists, psychologists, epidemiologists, and other animal scientists as well. Next slide, please. So my plan for today is to first share some general information about farmer well-being, One Health and One Welfare frameworks. Then I'll share some of the research that's being done in Canada, and I'll finish with some well-being resources for people working in agriculture. Next slide, please. So I'll start with One Health, One Welfare. And on the next slide, you'll see the framework for this. Many people are familiar with the One Health framework, where environment, human, and animal health are interconnected. But I like to use the One Welfare framework even more so because it goes beyond simple definitions of health, which generally is the absence of disease, and it looks at well being or welfare more holistically. And you can see we've got connections between human health and well-being for everyone living on the farm, and same as animal welfare and health. So not just your production farm animals, but all the animals that we share land with. And then finally, the environment. It's not just the biophysical environment; it's also the social environment. And so nothing functions in isolation on the farm. And a lot of talks today will talk about the environment or maybe animal sections here. I'm going to focus on the human component. Next slide, please. So there are many, many frameworks for looking at well-being, but the one I'm going to share here has 8 components. And I like this because it includes your physical well-being, emotional and mental well-being, but it also reminds us that there's so much more to consider, like environmental, financial, occupational, social, intellectual, and spiritual well-being. And so these all need to be balanced as a sort of wheel to ensure that we have good well-being overall. Next slide. And it's important to remember that we're not just considering physical health, right? We don't want to just think about mental health. Really, health is just one of many factors that contribute to our overall well-being. Next, please. So if you think about farmer well-being and what farmers experience, some stressors, there are many, and some of them are episodic at a certain point in time, and others are chronic, like lack of control. And so things like climate change, unpredictability, regulation, bureaucracy, finances, time, workload, isolation, pests, diseases, wildlife predation, work family conflict, criticism in the media or by the general public, a lot of uncertainty about the future, and as well succession planning. There's a lot of things that can stress farmers out. On the next slide, you'll see that they obviously have to balance all of this, right? They're working with family, and then they're trying to have what's called a work-life balance. On top of farm finances, they might have personal financial stress, and working with family and working on the farm where it's so demanding and you often have animals, it can be very difficult to disconnect. And it can also feel like there is no possibility to take a break, whether that's taking a single day off per week, which many farmers do not do, or even taking a vacation, right? And despite working with family members, farmers often can experience social loneliness, which is a perceived lack of connections. And then they can also experience emotional loneliness, which is the perceived lack of depth in relationships. Next slide. So one thing I wanted to bring forward for us to think about in the context of sustainable farming is the concept called the good farmer. This is a identity that a lot of farmers have for themselves, and it's a very important status that people hold within the agriculture community. And it goes beyond production and economically focused definitions of what a good farmer should be. So beyond that, good farmer should be strong. They should be self-reliant. Terms have also included displayed tidiness of the farm, as well as overarching productivism. So having good harvest volumes, good outputs. A good farmer also should provide for their family. They should continue on the farm for the next generation. And so there's a lot of pride that comes with being a good farmer, but there's also a lot of pressure and obligation towards the family and towards that legacy. And so feelings of failure can arise if a farmer is unable to manage every single degree of the farm to a certain standard that they're holding themselves to. Feelings of failure can also arise if they have to sell the farm and also seeking help, whether it's managing the farm or mental health types of help. This can all feel like a failure of being self reliant, and that can also threaten their identity. Threats to identity also can come from people questioning or criticizing the way that they farm, as well as making changes or forcing changes to the way that they farm because their identity is so deeply rooted in these systems and processes. Next slide, please. Oh, and so I wanted to mention that in the context of sustainability, a good farmer, right, should do this and that to maintain the health of their land. And a lot of farmers see themselves as stewards of the land. And so, if the public is questioning their methods, or even if a farmer is having an internal conflict of what they want to do with the land versus what they actually can do, that can create problems as well. So then, another layer that's added on top of all this is succession, and a lot of farms, I believe it's over 60% of farmers are going to be the age 60 at the year 2030, and it's estimated that 88% of farms do not have a written succession plan. The success of farms is really a result of multiple generations, labor, and work. And so the farm can be passed on, and along with it, the title of being the good farmer. And there have been studies that have looked at having a person identified as this identified successor has the ability to reduce the uncertainty for the current farmer. It can reduce their risk aversion, and it also increases that incentive to make changes, even if they're laborious ones, that would involve taking on new risks, using new management strategies, and this includes more sustainable practices as well. Next slide, please. So, some research have looked at how farmers approach succession. And in the context of well being, they actually looked at self efficacy, which is a domain of well being, and it is their belief in their ability to meet their goals. And so on the vertical axis, you can see there's high and low self efficacy. I know I can talk about succession, or I can't talk about succession. And this is actually plotted on the same similar axis as family dynamics. So those who have good family dynamics are better able to talk about succession. Those who have volatile families, they are unable to talk about succession. And then they grouped farmers into four groups based on their self-efficacy and based on their if it was high or low risk. So those who were feeling high self-efficacy but low risk, they could put succession on the back burner, whereas some was high risk, they were more actively planning. My apologies. On the other hand, if there was low self-efficacy, they couldn't talk about succession because of the volatile family dynamics. This would be your end of the line farmers who weren't going to continue the farm, or the succession avoiders. All right. So next slide, please. Let's continue. I'm going to make it. So we think about building resilience in farming operations a lot with climate change and that sort of thing, but you can also build resilience in people themselves. And in the mental health literature, resilience is defined as the ability to withstand or bounce back from hardships. And you can actually measure this using one of the validated scales that's out there. And essentially, people who score high for resilience generally score lower for things like anxiety, depression, and stress. And so being resilient helps prevent or protect people against poor mental health. There's also been correlations between people with higher resilience scores and being more willing to take on risks and engage in new practices that might be feeling risky and take on new practices that might be more sustainable. Next slide, please. Okay, so I've provided now some of the big picture types of information. Now I want to give specific information about research that's being done right here in Canada. Next slide, please. So first I'll share research from the University of Guelph. This was from a survey that was done across Canada in 2021 online using 7 validated scales. Next slide. These scales looked at things like resilience, anxiety, and depression. And so they found that 83% of farmers had lower resilience scores than the population norm that they compared against, and that 1 in 3 farmers had scores that indicated moderate to severe anxiety symptoms, and similarly, 1 in 5 farmers had scores that indicated moderate to severe depression. Next slide. They also looked at suicide ideation and found that it was over 2 times higher in farmers than the general population. And so 1 in 4 farmers had felt their life was not worth living, wished they were dead, or had thought of taking their own life in the past 12 months. Farmers were also scoring very high on burnout, and 76% were classified as experienced moderate or high perceived stress. Next slide, please. So, how farmers coped with stress. Here are some methods that farmers used significantly more than the general population. Things like sleeping more, avoiding others, eating more or eating less, self blame, and alcohol consumption. Next slide, please. And so I've just shared a bit of their results from the 2021 survey, but the important thing to know here is that they've doing this every 5 years, and they're now on the 3rd national survey. So this is open, and I'll provide the link at the end of my presentation again um, for people to be able to do that. Next slide, please. I now want to share University of Manitoba research that's happening on the prairies, and this is through the LEAP project. Some other presenters will be sharing about this tomorrow at the conference. LEAP stands for Leveraging Ecosystems to Transform Agriculture Across the Prairies. As you can see, there's 5 components and 5 teams working on this overall program, and at the core is engagement with farmers. There's also a landscape survey, plot experiments, Holos modeling for future farm scenarios, and finally, some self-determined agriculture with Indigenous communities. Next slide. And what I want to share today is just some of our initial work where we consulted with 40 farmers across the prairies. These were a mixture of conventional, regenerative, and organic farmers. And we asked things about their goals. What were they excited about working towards? They were excited overall about improving soil health, especially about supporting the next generation of farmers and about building sustainable operations. They felt concerned or limited by accessing land and capital, tariffs, and rising input costs. They felt enabled and supported by strong communities, practical funding opportunities, and confirmation that they are, in fact, moving the needle, being environmentally and financially. However, they felt limited by time, money, labor, and balancing all of the many hats that farmers have to wear, like a mechanic, business manager, account, all of the above. Next slide, please. So I really want to share some quotes or some paraphrased quotes from people. Most of these are from more conventional farmers who felt a bit of frustration actually because they said we wouldn't be here if we weren't sustainable. And things like a good farm manager doesn't need the best land. Farmers always have a key man issue, feeling it all comes down on one person. They also felt that they needed tools to help take the emotion out of decision making and that the opportunity cost was just too high not to grow things like beans. And finally, feeling that if tools are taken away, like a pesticide or a fertilizer, that you can't just keep taking away tools, they need to provide another tool to replace that. Next slide, please. These are quotes from the more regenerative labeling farmers, and they would say things like, I'm not the only creature who lives on my farm. The birds and soil don't give a damn about the market. The soil isn't a bank account, it's alive. I enjoy this one, micromanaging micronutrients versus just letting nature do its own thing. Across the board, farmers felt like they were trained to be a farmer, but not a boss. And a lot of times people were forced into that farm CEO role without HR training. On all sides, people felt that policy usually picks winners and losers, and that that's a Canadian pastime. So whether you're a big guy or a little guy, everyone felt like they were a loser. And with such a focus on grain, they felt cows weren't a priority for the country. And a lot of discussion was about limited meat processing capabilities nearby, as well as on farm specifically. Next slide, please. So I now have a student named Jess Goodwin who's specifically interviewing farmers about succession and self-efficacy and well-being. And we're still looking for farmers, so please reach on out to me if you're interested or know someone. A few things that she's heard, things like it's overwhelming at some points because it's a lot of different things, whether it be financial management, asset management, equipment decisions, crop production decisions, employee relations, hiring, all that kind of stuff. It's a lot. It's overwhelming. I'm too young to have confidence in myself at this point, but one day, hopefully. Another participant said sustainable intensification is the way of the future for their business. All right, next slide, please. So now I want to share some well-being resources. If you go to the next slide, I will share a way of thinking that I heard from Cynthia Beck, who is a beef farmer and a mental health provider in Saskatchewan. She compared farmers and their well-being and their brains to machinery. And just as you would maintain your machinery to prevent issues before things hit the fan and you required serious intervention, people should be looking after their mental health and well-being preventatively and doing maintenance and upkeep because farmers, you are your best farm. She says, farmers, you are your farm's best asset. So keep that in mind. Next slide, please. Here is a document. It's available online. It's from the University of Guelph. It's a emergency response model for preventing, intervening, and recovering from any sort of agriculture crisis to support mental health during these times. So there's many components. You can check this out online, but you'll see it in two places. It includes agriculture-specific mental health literacy training. On the next slide, you can find this at the ccaw.ca website. This stands for Canadian Centre for Agricultural Wellbeing. It's all science-based information. It's a free workshop. It's a mental health literacy training program, especially for farmers, families, and those who are working in agriculture. I've done it and it's lovely. There's also the National Farmer Crisis Line, which is 24/7 help. And then I'll give you a bit more resources on my very last slide. If you'll just go one more, please, I'll share a summary of what I've shared with you today. And this is that using the One Health and One Welfare frameworks to remember that nothing functions in isolation on the farm, and that we shouldn't just be looking at health because health is just one factor of our overall well-being. There's so much more at play. I talked about the good farmer, this pressure that farmers place on themselves to be the perfect farmer. I shared that the University of Guelph has their National Farmer Survey results available from their previous surveys, but that also the third is now open and available for farmers to participate in. I shared the University of Manitoba LEAP project, some of the quotes from farmers there, and finally, some well-being resources. So thank you. On the last slide, I'll leave you with just this, which has QR codes for the CCAW, has the Manitoba Farmer Wellness Program. It has the National Farmer Mental Health Alliance, the University of Guelph's QR code there. And I also wanted to mention Farm Management Canada, who's wonderful. I've worked with them on some projects, and they are an umbrella for farm business management. They're an organization dedicated to development and delivery of leading edge resources, information, and tools to support farm business success. And then finally, yeah, if you know anyone who was willing to chat about succession, not many are, please reach out to me and I will put you in touch with my student. Thank you.